Today, we're digging into something that's absolutely critical to car safety, but I bet you've never heard of it. We're going to uncover how a car with literally nothing broken on it can still be incredibly dangerous. Okay, just picture this for a second. You're driving along and every single part of your car is working perfectly. I mean, no warning lights, no system failures, nothing. And yet, in the blink of an eye, you completely lose control. Now, this isn't some sci-fi movie plot. It's a very real problem that engineers are losing sleep over. So, how is that even possible? So the huge idea we're tackling today is this. A system can be a major hazard even when it isn't broken. For decades, car safety was all about what happens when parts fail. You know, a brake line bursts, a sensor just dies. But what about when all the parts work exactly as they were designed to, but that design just isn't smart enough for the chaos of the real world? And that brings us to this funky acronym, SOTIF. It stands for Safety of the Intended Functionality. All that really means is that SOTIF deals with dangers that pop up not from broken parts, but from a system's built-in limits, or how it reacts to a tricky environment, or even how a driver might use it in a predictable but risky way. And here's the kicker. This system is doing its job perfectly, but its job description just wasn't ready for that one specific real-world moment. So where does SOTIF fit into the whole safety picture? Well, you can think of it as a whole new layer of protection. It doesn't replace the old school safety engineering, it adds a crucial safety net, especially for the crazy complex cars we're all driving today. Now, this slide really makes it click. Think about it like this. Traditional functional safety, or FUSA, is like a doctor for a sick car. It's there to fix things that are physically broken, like a transistor that short circuits. SOTIF, on the other hand, is like a teacher for a perfectly healthy but, let's say, inexperienced car. The system works just fine, but it needs to be taught how to handle tricky situations, like what to do on an icy road. One is about fixing a failure. The other is about teaching the car some road wisdom. All right, theory is great and all, but this stuff really comes to life when you see it in action. So let's dive into 4 real-world case files where a perfectly functional car could get you into some serious trouble. First up, a feature that a lot of electric vehicle drivers absolutely love, that strong regenerative braking. You know, where you lift your foot off the accelerator and the car slows down pretty hard all on its own. It's super convenient, but on a cold, wintry day, that convenience can turn dangerous in a split second. So here's the scenario. The driver just lifts their foot off the accelerator, the regenerative braking kicks in hard, but because the road is covered in ice, that braking force is enough to lock up the drive wheels. The car can instantly lose all grip and just spin out. And look at the triggers here. A slippery road and a totally normal driver action. Nothing is broken. The system is just applying the right amount of braking for the completely wrong situation. Now, to stop that spin out before it even starts, how fast do you think the car's brain needs to react? Get this. Less than 10 milliseconds. That is literally faster than your own brain can even register that something bad is happening. And the solution is, honestly, just brilliant. The car's controller is running what's called a slip control strategy. It's constantly watching the wheels, and the very instant, the microsecond it detects a slip, bam, it cuts that regenerative braking to 0. And it does it in that insane sub-10 millisecond window. Then, just as important, it slowly and smoothly brings the braking back as grip returns so you don't get a second slip. It's this beautiful, intelligent intervention that the driver never ever feels. Okay, on to our second case file. You're on the highway, you pull out to pass a big truck. You step on it, the car surges forward, and then, poof, nothing. The power just completely disappears, leaving you hanging out in the passing lane in a really, really bad spot. The culprit here, it's not a dead battery. It's an inaccurate guess about how much power the battery has. See, in the cold, or if the battery is getting old, the car's computer might think it has, say, 200 kilowatts of power ready for you. But when you actually demand all that power, the real-world voltage plummets below a safety limit, and the whole system shuts down to protect itself. So again, a performance limitation, the algorithm's guess was just wrong, creates a supercritical hazard. The solution here is so clever. First, the system is just programmed to be a little more pessimistic about its power estimates. But second, and this is the key, it uses a super high-speed voltage control loop. So instead of waiting for the voltage to completely crash and then cutting all the power, this loop sees the voltage starting to drop and proactively dials back the torque. And just like that, a catastrophic loss of propulsion turns into a totally manageable reduction in power, letting the driver finish the pass safely. All right, our third case gets into some really high-performance stuff, like torque vectoring. Now, all that does is make a car handle way better by cleverly sending different amounts of power to the left and right wheels when you're in a turn. But what happens when that system gets some bad advice? So in this scenario, a sensor that measures how fast the car is turning, it's called yaw rate sensor, it starts to drift because of the temperature. Now, it's not broken, it's not failed, it's just a little bit inaccurate. But the torque vectoring system takes that bad info as gospel and applies the wrong amount of power, which makes the car feel like some invisible force is pulling it off course. It's a classic SOTIF problem. A system limitation, not an outright failure, causes some seriously unsafe behavior. The fix here has two parts. First, you limit the system's authority. You basically program in a hard limit on how much extra torque it's allowed to apply, which makes sure the driver can always overpower it with the steering wheel. And second, you add a cross-check. The car's computer runs a virtual sensor in the background, using other data like wheel speeds, and it constantly compares the virtual sensor's reading to the physical one. If they don't line up, the system knows something's fishy and can just ignore the bad data. For our final case, we're looking at something called foreseeable misuse. This is all about when a driver uses a feature in a way that's totally allowed, but maybe in a situation the designers didn't quite see coming. And a perfect example of this is using that aggressive one-pedal driving mode on a packed highway. The hazard is pretty straightforward. A driver in heavy traffic suddenly lifts their foot off the accelerator. The car, which is set to its strongest regeneration mode, slows down sharply, almost as if they slammed on the brakes. But the driver behind them, who is watching for brake lights, sees nothing and might not react in time. And that's how you get a rear-end collision. And there's actually a legal line in the sand for this. If a car is slowing down faster than 1.3 meters per second squared, it's considered significant enough that other drivers have to be warned. So the SOTIF solution here is to just make the car smarter. The system is always monitoring that deceleration rate. The moment it crosses that legal threshold, it automatically turns on the brake lights, even if the driver's foot is nowhere near the brake pedal. It's communicating with the other drivers. It can also flash a little message on the dashboard, sort of gently educating the driver that, hey, this thing brakes pretty hard. So if these problems aren't caused by broken parts that you can just test for, how on earth do engineers find them before a car ever hits the showroom? Well, it takes a whole new set of tools for testing and validation. Engineers use a whole suite of these advanced techniques. They map out potential problems on paper before anyone even builds a part. They run millions of virtual tests in the cloud, throwing every what-if scenario you can imagine at the system. They hook up real hardware to simulators and intentionally feed it bad data, like sensor noise and drift, just to see if they can break the algorithm. And my favorite, they use something called shadow mode, where they run new software silently in the background on cars that are already on the road, just to see how it would have behaved in real life with zero risk. And all of this brings us to the big picture. You see, as cars become less about mechanics and more like supercomputers on wheels, our whole idea of what makes them safe has to change too. The big takeaway today is this. Modern car safety is really like a three-part suit of armor. You've got functional safety. That's your shield against broken parts. You've got cybersecurity, your shield against hackers and malware. And now you've got SOTIF, the crucial third shield, protecting you from a perfectly healthy system that just happens to make a bad call because of its own limitations. A car simply isn't safe unless all three of those shields are locked in place. And that really leaves us with one final thought. When you boil it all down, SOTIF is about trying to do one thing: program wisdom into a machine. It's not enough anymore for a car to be functional, it has to be savvy. And as our cars take on more and more of the driving for us, the question is no longer just will it work, but rather, is it smart enough?